Sometimes your own flesh and blood are your own worst enemies. I thought I'd already experienced the worst pain of my life when my husband Robert died. I was wrong because grief makes sense. It's natural. It's expected. But this, finding out your son got married without inviting you after you'd given him everything, it's a different kind of pain. One you're not supposed to feel from your own child. They'd hidden their Instagram stories from me. My own son muted me so I wouldn't see his wedding. But Sarah's mom, Linda, she reshared the photos. And that's how I saw it. Daniel in a suit, Sarah in a white dress, Marcelo's restaurant in the background. The venue I'd paid for, $2,800 just last month, for a wedding I wasn't invited to. We only invited special people, Sarah said when they showed up at my house a few days later. I'd given them $36,000 over 2.5 years. Apparently, that didn't make me special. But that moment, that's when something finally broke. Not my heart, my illusions. Let me tell you what happened next. So my son and his fiancée, well, his wife now, though I didn't know it yet, they showed up at my place that Tuesday. No warning, just knocked on the door. And I was excited, I thought we were finally going to sit down and talk about their wedding plans. I didn't even get the chance to offer them coffee. I asked when they were thinking of having the ceremony. And Sarah, my son's fiancée, she just looked me dead in the eye with this smile that made my blood run cold. Oh, we already got married. Last Saturday, actually. I stood there trying to process what she just said. All I could think was, last Saturday? How did I not know about this? Wait, why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I there? And that's when she said it. Those words I mentioned, the ones I'll never forget. We only invited special people. Special people? I just stood there in my own living room. Daniel wouldn't even look at me. And Sarah, my daughter-in-law, though it still didn't feel real, she sat down on my couch like she owned the place. I'd been planning everything for weeks, Put aside $1,200 as a wedding gift, called my brother Marcus out in Seattle to tell him the good news. I even deep cleaned my entire house, thinking maybe they'd come back here to celebrate after the ceremony. And then those 3 words just destroyed all of it. Special people. Daniel finally said something. His voice sounded, I don't know how to describe it, rehearsed maybe? Like he'd practiced what to say. Mom, it was just quick, really small, just us and a couple witnesses. But here's the thing. I already knew he was lying. Because like I said, I'd seen the photos. They'd hidden their Instagram stories from me. You know how you can mute someone so they can't see what you post? They did that. Made sure I wouldn't see their wedding stories. But Sarah's mom, Linda, she'd reshared some of Sarah's stories to her own Instagram. And that's how I found out. I saw everything they tried so hard to keep hidden from me. Sarah's parents in every single story, both of them with these huge smiles. Her brother raising a champagne glass in one video. The restaurant, Marcelo's, this nice Italian place downtown. I recognized it immediately because I'd helped pay for it. $2,800 I gave them last month when Daniel said they needed help with an event venue. I guess my own son's wedding counted as an event. They didn't just forget to invite me. They actively blocked me from even seeing their Instagram stories. They muted me, hid it all from me, like I was someone they needed to hide their happiness from. 1 week later, exactly 7 days after that whole mess call, my phone rings. It's Sarah, and let me tell you, her voice was completely different now. Gone was that confident woman who'd basically told me I wasn't good enough for their wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost begging, actually. Margaret, we're in trouble. The rent's overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay by Friday, he's starting eviction proceedings. You forgot to send the transfer. Her voice was actually shaking, like the world was ending. I didn't say anything at first. I was just sitting there remembering all those times I dropped everything to run to the bank. All those times I'd canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All those nights I'd eaten beans and rice so they could have money for whatever they wanted. Sarah, I said, and honestly, I surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Didn't I tell you I only help special people? The silence on her end was so complete, I could literally hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one shaking. She was. Margaret, wait, I don't understand, she stammered. We've always been special to you. You're like a second mom to me. Lies. Every single word. All wrapped up in that sweet voice she only ever used when she needed something from me. Same voice she'd used asking for money for the venue, for the rings, for whatever expenses they had. I'd paid for all of it without even knowing I'd never see the ceremony. You know that feeling? When you're constantly walking on eggshells around your own family? Weighing every single word, every gesture, every gift you give, hoping maybe this time you'll get just a little bit of affection back from your own son. I was the perfect mother, the mother-in-law who never complained, the silent bank account who just kept giving and giving while they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, special people, something about it just woke me up after all those years of being asleep. I'd already done the math in my head, you know? 2.5 years of paying for absolutely everything. Rent, food, gifts, emergencies, whatever little thing they wanted went all added up to over $36,000. 36,000. Money I'd taken straight from my retirement savings, from what my husband Robert had left me so I could live my last years in peace. And for what? Just to get treated like a complete stranger at my own son's wedding? That night after I hung up on her, I just sat on my bed and cried. But here's what's weird. They weren't sad tears. They were angry tears. Frustrated. All those years of humiliation I just swallowed in silence, it all came pouring out. I know what they'd say if they could hear me right now. That I'm destroying their lives, being cruel, abandoning them when they need me most. But am I really destroying their lives? Or am I just finally stopping myself from destroying mine? Think about it. I'm not taking anything away from them. I'm just not giving anymore. There's a difference, right? They're two healthy adults, perfectly capable. If they can't pay their own rent without me, whose fault is that? Mine for enabling them all this time? Or theirs for never learning to stand on their own 2 feet? I cried for every single time they made my love feel like a burden. Every time my presence felt like it was just in the way. Every time the only thing about me that mattered was my bank account. I cried for the foolish mother I'd been. The woman who'd completely lost herself trying to be needed by people who didn't even want her around. When I woke up the next morning, something had changed inside me. It wasn't just the pain anymore. It was something deeper, colder. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same tired eyes I'd seen for years. Same wrinkles from decades of giving love and getting absolutely nothing back. But there was something else there now. A hardness I didn't recognize. A determination that had been buried under years of just going along with whatever they wanted. I went to make coffee, like I'd done every single morning for 35 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Daniel to ask how he slept. Didn't check my phone, hoping for an apology message. For the first time in forever, I was the first priority of my own day. I sat down at my kitchen table, same table where I'd planned so many surprises for them over the years, counted out bills for their expenses, cried quietly when they treated me like I didn't matter. Now this table was going to witness something completely different. I grabbed my checkbook and all my bank statements, spread them out in front of me, because I wanted to see it in actual numbers, just how stupid I'd been. Monthly rent, $650 times 30 months, that's $19,500 right there. Groceries and supplies, about $180 every month. Another $5,400. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, anniversary gifts, at least $2,800. Sarah's emergency dental work, $950. That car down payment they swore they'd pay me back for, $3,200. The AC repair in their apartment, $750. Living room furniture, $1,400. The wedding venue at Marcello's, $2,800. $36,000. That's the exact price of my generosity. 36 grand from my husband's life insurance, from my pension, from savings I'd scraped together penny by penny over decades of honest work. All of it wasted on keeping two adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. My phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen. Normally, my heart would race and I'd run to answer it, hoping he'd finally apologize, tell me it was all just some terrible misunderstanding. This time I just let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, then silence. And I kept drinking my coffee like nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Sarah, this time. I let that one ring out too. Then a text from Daniel popped up on my screen. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without even responding. Around 2 p.m, I decided to go for a walk. And here's the thing, I hadn't done that in months. Just walked for absolutely no reason. No errand I had to run for them. It was always the bank to make their transfers, the grocery store to buy them something they needed, the pharmacy to pick up Sarah's medications. Today, I walked just because I wanted to. I passed by the park where I used to take Daniel when he was little. I remembered this sweet boy who'd hug me so tight and tell me I was the best mom in the world. And I kept thinking, when did he turn into this man who treats me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start thinking love and money were the same thing? When did I start believing I had to buy my own son's affection? I stopped in front of the bank where I'd done all those automatic transfers for so long. Mr. Patterson, the branch manager, saw me through the glass and waved. He'd known me for years, processed every single one of my transfers to Daniel and Sarah, watched my account drain month after month just to fill up theirs. I walked right in and went straight to his office. Mr. Patterson, I said, I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have set up. He looked genuinely surprised. For 2.5 years, these transfers had been as regular as clockwork. Are you sure, Mrs. Morrison? Did something happen? And his concern, it was real, more genuine than any interest Daniel had shown in me for months. What happened is I finally opened my eyes. I told him, I want everything canceled. And I also need to know how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else having access to my money. While Mr. Patterson was processing all the paperwork, my phone would not stop buzzing. Daniel, Sarah, Daniel again. It's like they had some kind of radar for when their money supply was in danger. I just turned the phone completely off. Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Patterson said as he handed me the papers to sign, forgive me for overstepping here, but in all these years, I've seen you be incredibly generous with your family. I just want to make sure you're not being pressured to make these changes. His words really touched me, This man who barely knew me beyond bank transactions was showing more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son had in months. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Patterson. Actually, it's the opposite. I finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt this strange lightness, like I just left some enormous burden behind in that office. For the first time in years, my money was completely mine. I had zero financial obligations to people who saw me as nothing more than a resource instead of a person. I started thinking about all the things I hadn't done just to please Daniel and Sarah, the trips I hadn't taken because I was saving money for them, the friends I didn't see anymore because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I'd given up because every dollar I spent on myself was one less dollar for whatever they needed. When I got home, I found 2 cars parked right in front of my door. Daniel's car, and one I didn't recognize. Through my front windows, I could see movement inside my house. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I'd given them keys to my house because I trusted them, because I thought one day they'd take care of me just like I'd taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening that door. I remember thinking, this is it, the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door and saw a scene I'll never forget. Daniel was sitting on my sofa with his head buried in his hands. Sarah was pacing back and forth like some caged animal. And there was this older man I'd never seen before going through papers on my dining table. My papers. My personal documents. What is happening here? I asked. My voice came out louder than I expected. All three of them looked at me like I was the intruder in my own house. Sarah spoke first, and her voice had that desperate urgency I'd already heard on the phone. Margaret, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Henderson. He's from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The question came out calm, way calmer than I actually felt. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Daniel finally lifted his head and looked at me. Those eyes that used to belong to an innocent child. Now all I could see in them was financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Patterson said you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Henderson in his 50s, wearing a charcoal suit and a smile that absolutely did not inspire confidence. He walked over to me with his hand out. Mrs. Morrison, I'm Dr. Henderson, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked directly to my dining table and just started gathering up all the papers he'd been looking through without my permission. These are my private documents, I said. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Daniel cut in with this condescending voice he'd somehow perfected over the years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been really strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without any explanation. Then you won't answer our calls. We think you might need some professional help. Sarah came closer and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she only used when she needed something. Margaret, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, these kinds of confusion episodes are pretty normal. The word confusion just echoed in my head like an alarm bell. And that's when I finally understood why they'd brought this lawyer. It wasn't about helping me at all. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent so they could take control of my finances. The same woman who told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like some senile old lady. I am not confused, I said. My voice was firm enough that everyone just went silent. I'm clearer than I've been in years, and all three of you are leaving my house right now. Mr. Henderson stepped in with that professional voice lawyers use when they're trying to sound reasonable. Mrs. Morrison, I understand you're feeling overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors. The laugh that came out of me was harsh, almost cruel. Like what exactly? Deciding that my money actually belongs to me? Deciding to stop financing the lives of two adults who treat me like garbage? Sarah jumped up like I'd physically slapped her. We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have is going to belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process a little. There it was, the naked truth, right out in the open. Everything I had would one day belong to them. In their minds, I was already dead. They were just collecting their inheritance a little early. Didn't matter if I had 68 years left to live or 68 days. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had started malfunctioning. Out, I said, pointing straight at the door. All three of you, leave my house. Daniel stood up with that angry, childlike face he always made when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off overnight like this, can't I? My voice rose for the first time in this whole conversation. Who says I can't? For 2.5 years, I've been paying rent on a place that's not even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a whole life that clearly had absolutely no place for me in it. Mr. Henderson, pulled a folder out of his briefcase and put it on my table. Mrs. Morrison, we've prepared some documents that could make this transition easier for everyone. A power of attorney that would allow Daniel and Sarah to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you're feeling better. I picked up that folder and, all without even opening it, threw it straight into my trash can. The only transition that's happening here is you three transitioning to my front door. Sarah actually started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure frustration, of rage she couldn't contain anymore. You can't do this to us, Margaret. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial commitments because we knew we could count on you. Commitments based on my money, I shot back. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used in my own life, suddenly I'm this confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Daniel tried to walk toward me, but I took a step back. He wasn't that boy who used to run into my arms when he had nightmares anymore. He was a 33-year-old man who saw his mother as nothing but an obstacle between him and a comfortable life financed by someone else. Mom, we made mistakes, he said in this voice that was supposed to sound sorry. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Sarah was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix all of this if you just become reasonable again. Reasonable. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means I keep paying for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means I pretend it doesn't hurt that I was excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Henderson started packing up his papers with the smooth efficiency of someone who's used to having their proposals rejected. Mrs. Morrison, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you're indeed making irrational decisions because of mental health problems, a judge can determine that you need guardianship. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized right then that this wasn't just some manipulative family visit. This was a real legal threat. They actually wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. Mr. Henderson, I said, looking him straight in the eyes, I suggest you do your research very thoroughly before you threaten a 68-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years. A woman who raised her son completely alone after her husband died, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week was financially supporting two completely capable adults. Sarah stopped crying and looked at me with this coldness that finally showed me her true face. This won't end like this, Margaret. We have rights, and we have lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want with your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. All three of them walked to the door with that wounded dignity people have when they're not used to being told no. Before he left, Daniel turned back to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end really badly for you. You're going to wind up completely alone with nobody to take care of you when you actually need it. Daniel, I said, and I felt this deep sadness, but also this crystal clear clarity. I'm already alone. The difference is now it's by my own choice, not because of your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I just stood there in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I'd heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of sadness or regret, but because of pure adrenaline from having finally reclaimed control of my own life. I lay there in bed wide awake, planning my next steps like some general preparing for battle. If Daniel and Sarah wanted to fight, I'd give them a war. But it would be a war I'd fight with intelligence, not emotion. By 6 a.m, I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of this attorney, Mr. Weber. I'd met him years ago when I was handling Robert's will. Unlike Mr. Henderson, who Daniel and Sarah had brought to my house, Mr. Weber had this impeccable reputation. He specialized in protecting elderly people's rights. Mrs. Morrison, he told me as I explained the whole situation, what your children attempted yesterday is way more common than you'd think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's actually a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and went through your private documents, that's also a violation. His words both calmed me and worried me at the same time. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy. What happened was genuinely abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was way more serious than I thought. We need to document absolutely everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every transfer, every gift, every single time they pressured you for money. We're also going to change your will to protect your assets from any future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 solid hours going through all my financial records. Mr. Weber actually whistled when he saw the total. $36,000 in 2.5 years. Mrs. Morrison, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, really enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. When I left Mr. Weber's office, I had this complete plan laid out. First, change every single lock on my house. Second, install a full security system with cameras to protect myself from any future surprise visits. Third, open a brand new bank account at a completely different bank where they had 0 contacts. Fourth, start actually living the life I'd been postponing for years. My next stop was this hardware store nearby. The owner, Mr. Cole, had known me for years because I was constantly buying things to fix stuff in Daniel and Sarah's apartment. This time was different. Mrs. Morrison, what brings you in today? He asked with that familiar tone of someone who'd silently watched my generosity get wasted for years. Mr. Cole, this time it's actually for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want the absolute best quality you have. He looked surprised but didn't ask any questions. While I was picking out locks, his son Tyler, who installs security systems, came walking by. I remember thinking it was like Providence. Tyler, I told him, I also need to get surveillance cameras installed. The complete system. Price really isn't an issue. While they were getting everything ready for installation the next day, I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. That same afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in over a year. I went to the beauty salon. I'd always canceled my appointments because Daniel or Sarah suddenly needed something urgent, or because the money I'd set aside for myself had to become an emergency fund for them instead. Mrs. Morrison, my favorite stylist, Rebecca, actually called out when she saw me. What a surprise. I honestly thought you'd forgotten about us. I didn't forget you, Rebecca. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered sometimes. I treated myself to the absolute full treatment that day. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling even a little bit guilty about it. While Rebecca was working on my hair, she told me about her life, her kids, her dreams. It was so refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve entirely around Daniel and Sarah's needs. For once, you look beautiful, Mrs. Morrison, she said when she was finally done. But more than that, you look, I don't know, free, maybe? Did something good happen? Yes, Rebecca. I finally learned how to say no. Later that evening, after I'd gotten home and made myself some dinner, my phone rang again. Another unknown number. It was Sarah calling from someone else's phone because I'd already blocked her number after yesterday's confrontation. Margaret, it's Sarah. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Talk, I said. My voice was ice cold. Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Daniel and I have talked about it, and we really want to make it up to you. How about we have this special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We could do it at your house. Cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so painfully obvious, I almost had to laugh. Sarah, exactly how much rent do you owe right now? The silence on her end told me I'd hit the nail right on the head. Well, it's actually 2 months now, 1,300 total. But I'm not just calling about that, Margaret. We genuinely miss you in our lives. Do you miss me or do you miss my money? Both. she replied with this surprising honesty. Margaret, I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get even one call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? Another silence. We both knew the answer to that. Never. Sarah, I'm only going to explain this one time. For 2.5 years, you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And then finally, you insulted me in the absolute worst possible way. Now that the money's running out, you suddenly discover you love me? Margaret, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned my phone completely off. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. The next morning, I went to do my grocery shopping, something I used to absolutely dread because I was always calculating how much I could spend after I'd sent Daniel and Sarah their money. Today was different. I put whatever I actually wanted in my cart. Fresh salmon, good wine, expensive cheese, all these small luxuries I'd been denying myself for years. I was in the produce section, picking out some tomatoes, when I heard this familiar voice. Margaret! I turned around and saw Linda and Robert Chen, Sarah's parents. We'd met several times over the years at family dinners that I'd hosted and paid for, actually. Linda walked over, but her expression wasn't that warm smile I was used to seeing. She looked concerned, awkward even. Margaret, hi, she said carefully. How are you? We missed you at the wedding. There it was. Robert stood right beside her, looking equally uncomfortable. Sarah told us you weren't feeling well. She said you had, what was it, honey? A bad flu. Linda filled in quickly. She said you were absolutely devastated to miss it, but didn't want to risk getting everyone else sick. I just stood there holding a tomato as the full picture became crystal clear in my mind. They'd lied. Of course they'd lied. A flu, I repeated slowly. Yes, Linda continued, and her voice was getting softer. Sarah said you'd been stuck in bed for days and could barely even get up. We wanted to call and check on you, but she said you needed rest, and she stopped talking, finally reading my expression. Margaret, that's not true, is it? I could have just gone along with it, could have nodded and said, yeah, terrible flu, still recovering a bit. Thanks so much for asking. But I was completely done protecting people who kept throwing me under the bus. I didn't have the flu, I said calmly. I wasn't sick at all. Robert's face completely changed. Then why didn't you come? I didn't come, I said, looking Linda directly in the eyes, because I wasn't invited. The silence that stretched between us felt like this massive chasm opening up. What? Linda's voice came out barely above a whisper. Sarah and Daniel came to my house the Tuesday after their wedding, a wedding I knew absolutely nothing about, and told me they'd gotten married the Saturday before. When I asked why I wasn't invited, Sarah looked me straight in the eye and said they only invited special people. Linda's hand flew up to her mouth. No, that can't be. Those were her exact words, I continued. We only invited special people, and apparently the mother of the groom didn't qualify. Robert looked absolutely devastated. But Sarah told us you were too sick to come. She seemed genuinely upset about it. She kept saying, she lied, I said simply. She lied to you because it's a lot easier to say I had the flu than to admit they deliberately excluded me from my own son's wedding. Oh my God, Linda breathed out. Her eyes were filling up with tears. Margaret, if we had known. You would have what? I asked. Not unkindly. It was their wedding, their choice to make. But you're his mother, Robert said, and his voice was tight with anger now. What kind of person excludes their own mother and then lies about it to everyone? Linda was really looking at me now, actually seeing me, maybe for the first time. Sarah's been asking us for money, she said slowly, like pieces were clicking together. She called us a few days ago saying they were having these cash flow problems and needed help with rent. She made it sound like just a one-time thing, just a rough month. It's not a one-time thing, I said. For 2.5 years, I've been paying their rent. $650 every single month, plus groceries, furniture, emergencies, her dental work, their car down payment. How much? Robert interrupted me. I met his gaze directly. $36,000 total. Linda actually gasped out loud. Robert looked like I'd physically punched him in the stomach. $36,000? He repeated in complete disbelief. And they didn't even invite you to the wedding? I paid for the venue, I added. $2,800 I gave them last month when Daniel told me they needed help with event expenses. I saw all the photos on Instagram. Marcello's restaurant. It looked beautiful. Jesus Christ, Robert muttered, running his hand through his hair. Linda was crying now. Real tears. We raised her better than this. I really thought we raised her better than this. Margaret, I am so, so sorry. It's not your fault, I said gently. You didn't know any of this because they lied to us. Linda's voice cracked. They made up this whole elaborate story about you being sick so we wouldn't question why you weren't there. And now I'm realizing there were only about 15 people total at that wedding. Small and intimate. Sarah kept saying, just the people who matter most. That's exactly what she told us. Apparently, I didn't matter most, I said, or really at all when you think about it. Robert looked completely devastated. What are you going to do now? I already did it, I replied. I cut them off completely. No more money, no more rent payments, no more being their emergency fund while they treat me like I'm invisible. Good, Linda said fiercely, wiping away her tears. You should have done it years ago, honestly. And Margaret, she reached out and squeezed my hand. Those special people they invited to that wedding? Let them pay the rent now. Not you. Never you again. Robert pulled out his wallet and handed me a business card. If they come after you, legally or any other way, you call us immediately. We'll testify about everything if we need to. What they did is absolutely unconscionable. As I walked away with my shopping cart, I heard Linda's voice behind me shaking with pure anger. We need to call Sarah right now. I want to hear her try to explain this. I smiled to myself as I continued shopping. Good luck with that conversation, Sarah. When I got home that evening, there was a car parked in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart started racing for just a second, thinking maybe Daniel and Sarah had come back with more reinforcements. But as I got closer, I saw this older woman sitting on my porch steps. Mrs. Morrison? She asked as I got out of my car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you with something? I'm Helen Brooks. I live right next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really had a proper chance to talk. Yesterday, I heard some very loud voices coming from your house, and I got worried. Is everything all right? Her concern felt so sincere, it actually touched me deeply. Here was basically a stranger showing more genuine interest in my well-being than my own son had in months. Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make us some coffee and tell you a story you absolutely won't believe. While I was making the coffee, I told her everything. The whole story from start to finish. Helen just listened without interrupting once, nodding occasionally. When I finally finished, her eyes were completely filled with tears. Mrs. Morrison, she said, you did the right thing. I went through something incredibly similar with my own daughter about 4 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed she wouldn't love me anymore if I stopped giving her money. What happened? I asked. I cut off the money when I finally realized she only ever called me when she needed something. At first, it was absolutely terrible. Threats, emotional blackmail, guilt trips, the whole thing. But after about 7 months, my daughter actually called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship, one that's based on actual love, not on money. Her words gave me this sense of hope and confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Do you think Daniel and Sarah will understand someday? Maybe yes, Maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's not your responsibility anymore, Mrs. Morrison. Your responsibility right now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 2.5 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Daniel and Sarah had money for rent or food or whatever they wanted. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Tyler and Mr. Cole came at 8 in the morning to change all my locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone kept buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. Sarah was still trying to reach me from different phones, but I developed this new skill, this completely ignoring calls that didn't suit me. Mrs. Morrison, Tyler said as he was finishing up the camera installation, this system is going to give you absolute peace of mind. You'll be able to see from your phone exactly who's coming to your house even when you're not here. And if someone tries to break in without permission, it automatically sends an alert straight to the police. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son. But you know what? It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It was just a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. As I sat in my living room that evening, surrounded by my new locks and cameras, I realized something important. For the first time in years, I felt safe in my own home, not because of any security system, but because I had finally learned to protect myself from the people who were supposed to protect me.